Jager, everyone.
Guru.
Bigger.
Welcome to the Awake Minute by Minute podcast. We'll be reviewing minute 41 this episode, and we were doing some calculations before we started. We think this might be halfway to completion on this project. So just a celebration on that.
Hey.
On guys, good effort. And we're joined today by Carlos, a fellow devotee. And Carlos, maybe you can first introduce yourself, say hi, and maybe how you know the guys.
Hi. So I joined the London Meditation Center online meditations, and there I serve as a leader, harmonium player, and usher. And as part of that activity, Priyank also is a leader, usher, and harmonium player. So we've spent some time together organizing things and getting it going. So I got to know Priyank a bit better through that.
Carlos, did you come to the London Centre much? I don't think I've seen you at the centre itself much.
Yeah, so I don't live in London itself. I live about an hour west of London. So I would normally go only for the Sunday services. Okay. Normally only the latter part, because I would bring the whole family and stuff. So so not too much. That was one thing that was really hard in the past. We didn't have any online meditations. If you wanted to meditate with other people, you would have to sometimes travel like an hour and a half each way. Mm-hmm. So now I can meditate with fellow devotees every day, morning and evening. So it's really good.
Blessings. Where's your family originally from?
Brazil. We're originally from Brazil. Yeah.
So you, I think, probably like the fifth or sixth Brazilian we've had. Brazil's taking over the show, and Chris has also moved almost half his life to Brazil.
Okay.
6 months in Belo Horizonte. Where in Brazil?
Rio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Do you know what the scene is like with SRF in Rio?
Yeah, so I started there. So it was funny when I read the book, I went to the back, I saw the website, I signed up for lessons, and I was taking the lessons. I never thought about like centers or anything like that. And then got an email from SRF saying, there's going to be a monastic visit. If you would like to do a Kriya interview, you should get in touch with your local center. And it was like local center. I was like,
Nice. So you've been going.
Exactly.
Oh, sorry, the video dropped off there for a bit. So you've been going to the center then since.
In Rio, I used to go to the center in Rio. I used to serve there as well. Nice. That's where I started.
How do you get introduced to Guruji, or like, how did you come across this path?
I was on a yoga retreat, and then hatha yoga retreat, and someone was reading the autobiography of a yogi, and then the person was like, I hadn't seen the cover yet, but the person was like, this guy writes these things. I mean, it's hard to believe. And I was like, okay, what is it? Maybe, sometimes you can't believe. I mean, sometimes it's true. And then I saw the cover, and then what happens, right? So, and I procrastinated actually for a couple of years after that. But then at some point, I just woke up one day and bought the book and read it. Yeah.
Nice.
The rest is history. And when did you first watch the Awake documentary?
Well, not too long after that. So for me, it was very quick at the beginning, and I must have read the book, like, I was checking the other day. I think I signed up for the lessons like 10 days after I bought the book on Amazon. Mm-hmm. So I must have read the book in like 1 week.
Wow.
Nice.
Yeah. So
you devoured it. Yeah.
It was funny because throughout the book, all the time I was thinking, yeah, I know. Yes, I know. It's like I it's like you arrived late for a class or something, and the teacher is scolding you, and you're going like, yeah, you're right.
Did you read it in Portuguese or English?
I read it in English, yeah.
Okay. Carlos's English accent is very neutral, isn't it? You wouldn't tell that he's from any specific country. I suppose that's true for a lot of Brazilians.
No, I think there probably is quite a strong Brazilian Portuguese accent coming through with a lot of people, because it is quite different with certain letters, R's and H's and things like that, which we use commonly. It's quite significant. So you do have a very neutral accent. So well done to you if you've worked on that.
He's a man of the world, is Carlos.
Yeah, I lived in the US for 7 years. So
Okay.
There you go. Okay. What did you, when you saw the Awake movie, what did you think about it the first time? Do you still remember?
Good point. Yeah. So when I read the book, I was definitely kind of signed up for the path, but I was kind of committed to being very lonely path, and, you know, kind of not a lot of people understanding what I was talking about, right? So when I saw the movie, right at the beginning, you know, you get this feeling that's like a cool movie, right? There's like this rock song at the beginning, right? And then there's like Steve Jobs and George Harrison, and, you know, and then, you know, the feeling was like, oh, you know, maybe there's going to be a lot of people to hang out with, you know, because this is something very current, right? It's something, you know, appealing, right, to broader public. So the strongest feeling I got from the movie was like, you know, maybe it's not going to be so lonely after all.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Well, yeah, thanks for joining the call, and do jump in with anything, any comments at all throughout. We do want to hear from you as much as possible. Give the listeners some different perspectives. Yes, good to have you. Really, this minute, another fascinating minute, and lots to review. It really follows from the previous minute, where we were looking at willpower quite nicely. So it looks at concentration, willpower in the last minute, and we do touch on some of Yogananda's abilities, and he was displaying them to people. What, you know, a couple of stories that were shared. One of them was sending 6 men catapulting across the stage and stopping his pulse, and yeah, the stories of essentially him resurrecting himself. So quite supernatural experiences. This minute really is dominated, I think, 3/4 of it really by Mr. Bikram, and really him talking. So footage of him getting interviewed, and then old footage of him doing a stunt, and then we have speech from Paramhansa Yogananda, and we end the minute with comments, and it's the first appearance of a gentleman called Robert Love. And really, when I was thinking of how are we going to kind of theme, what is the theme of this minute, because I think actually when we look back, there is blocks of themes as we go through the minute. And I thought this one really is about supernatural abilities. So when we look at the script in particular, we see Bikram Chaudhry talking about every human being has a supernatural power, but essentially they don't know how to use it. And then it goes on to say that you have to realize it. And Yogananda really came in to say that you have to apply the techniques and find out for yourself, and don't take his word for anything when he talks about very supernatural occurrences. And Carlos, you were just talking before we started recording, and actually just on the recording itself, about people believing or not believing what was in the book. And Yogananda was a big proponent to say, guys, like, don't take my word for it, go out and do things yourself. So the theme really of this minute is supernatural occurrences. And I wanted to start really with Robert Love, actually, and he comes in at the very end of the minute. Priyank, maybe you can tell us a little bit about who Robert Love was.
Yes, I hadn't heard of Robert Love before this, but he's actually quite renowned, and he's got quite a prominent role in the film, actually. So from this point, even though this is, 41st minute, it's his first entry to the film, then he's got some very important lines that go through the film, and his voice is very, very soothing, and he talks very well, doesn't he? But he apparently is a journalist and author, author of The Great Orm, I think, The Improbable Birth of Yoga in America. He has worked in magazine publishing for 30 years and was the MD of Rolling Stone and executive editor of The Best Life. He's an adjunct professor of journalism at Columbia University, and he's had articles in all the major newspapers like New York Times and Observer and other places. So quite renowned, and he's got quite a cool look. He wears those like Harry Potter type glasses, and has a bit scruffy hair, but it looks very intellectual.
I was trying to look it up myself. What was it? About one of the recent books that he wrote. What was that about? And it turns out one of the books that he was very well known for is The Great Om. And really, this is a book, a biography on a guy called Mr. Pierre Bernard. And I thought it was interesting because it has strong relevance to this minute, to this theme. So the book was really based on this chap called Pierre Arnold Bernard, who was seen to be a yogi. Really, he was also called the Great Om, or the Omnipotent Om, and Om the Magnificent. So he had these titles or names, and he was seen as a pioneering American yogi, scholar, occultist, philosopher, mystic, and businessman. But one thing that really caught my attention was he was seen on many occasions, and it was reported that it would be at random, so people might kind of show up and want to see this for themselves. He would pierce his skin with steel surgical needles and not seem to flinch or draw any blood. And he had some level of, let's say, mastery over this ability. So really, that kind of sets some kind of theme for this minute. I thought it was interestingly linked, and I'm sure no doubt not coincidental, to really the main chunk of this minute, which is Bikram talking about spiritual powers, and then going into old footage of him lying on a bed of needles, it looks like, with a ramp kind of over his chest, and then there's a motorbike that races up and flies over him over this ramp. And the link is really to concentration powers. So he's concentrating super hard on making this thing happen. I want to hold, a position, and you guys can maybe put forward the opposite opinions or position, where this is a critique on my part on the minute and on the documentary, because this to me is more like a circus act, and it doesn't really hold bearing for what yoga and the powers that yoga could bring to you, as we'll get into in a minute or two. And it's often, to my mind, what people consider yogis to be, these kind of circus acts, and it links to what Pierre would have been doing as well, kind of piercing his skin and doing things like that. So Priyank, you have maybe something to say on this, but I would say that this chunk of time could have been better used for something that would have been more akin to spiritual powers. What do you think?
Yeah, I do. I agree. But I think it also sets the scene for like where yoga is, kind of plants the seed for some stuff that happens a bit later in terms of where the film direction is going. So we know, for example, Yogananda also did a bit of like circusy type stuff on the stage. He used to like demonstrate various things, and we've talked about his heart rate and sending security people catapulting across the room just by a flick of his stomach. So even he used such, you might say circus acts, but demonstrations of power. His purposes were obviously firstly just to draw them in, and then teach them the real science of yoga through some pretty deep teachings through the lessons and other meditation practices.
Yeah, to my mind, possibly to counter that Priyanka a little bit, is they're two very different things, right? Like having lying on a bed of needles, these kind of things. It's one thing, but then to be able to throw 6 men across a stage is like, it's very uncommon. And just before we go on, and Mike, no, maybe you have something to share here as well. I'll come to you. I wanted to actually define what it is that we're talking about. The term supernatural powers. So the definition of supernatural is that which is attributed to some force beyond scientific understanding or the laws of nature. I would argue then lying on a bed of needles and having a fast moving object flying over you is quite scientific in some sense. You could probably work out exactly what's going on there from a scientific point of view, but not necessarily through throwing 6 men across the stage. do you know what I mean? So quite unusual, very supernatural versus something that we probably can do the calculations scientifically. Versus, sorry, Mike, I'll come to you. What would you have to share?
It's an interesting debate. I'm not sure where I stand, because on the one hand, the masters in all ages that came, they always performed some kind of miracle, and it seems to be somehow part of convincing future students maybe that there's something real to it. Maybe they're too deep caught in the delusion and something like this will get you out. But the critique that you put out that the movie shouldn't focus too much on it, I do understand it, because on the other hand, I feel like the movie could have focused a bit more on maybe the experience of cosmic consciousness and the way there, and not sure if it does a perfect job going into that direction. I'm also not sure if that's what they wanted, but I would love to see a movie that does that goes deeper into that space, because I feel like this fascinates me more than like riding a motorcycle over a guy or things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Carlos.
Yeah. So when I watched the minute, I was having similar thoughts, Chris, and interestingly, I was obviously reading some random part of my daily reading, and I read something that kind of rang a bell related to this. You kind of have to stretch it a little bit. Is it okay if I read a few passages?
Yeah, please.
All right. So it's Second Coming of Christ, Discourse 40. Okay. So Jesus gave his divine power to Judas along with the other 11. But instead of using his free will to take advantage of his spiritual opportunity, Judas succumbed to delusion and became an instrument of evil. Even though Jesus gave to his disciples in equal measure, they each received and manifested his teachings differently according to the various degrees of spirituality and good and bad karma. The advanced disciples, such as St. John, were completely liberated during the lifetime of Jesus. But Judas had to work out through many incarnations of evil karma of his act of betrayal to Jesus. According to certain great masters of India, and then it goes on and on about Judas, but the point is, the gift is given of the supernatural power. And it's interesting that it says that it's given to everyone, right? Everyone has it. But then it says you have to realize it. So it's almost like a responsibility. It's almost like a duty. There's a sense of purpose for everyone to then seek to realize and make good use of whatever's being granted.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it really ties in with something else that I have to share in the minute later on. So good coincidental reading, attuned reading as well. We'll come to in a few moments. That's awesome. One thing that I found when I was doing a bit of research on this was a quote that said it was by Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. It's a French name, so I probably butchered that pronunciation. He died in 1955. He was a Jesuit priest. He was trained as a philosopher and paleontologist. He said quite famously, we are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And again, that hopefully sets the tone for really the upcoming info. Because when I thought about spiritual powers, I looked at the definition, and it's that force beyond scientific or understanding of the laws of nature. I thought there's maybe a very coarse way to cut them up into sections to say there's kind of common supernatural occurrences, and then there's very uncommon supernatural occurrences. And if I may say that some uncommon supernatural occurrences might be related to the more 8 classical cities that you can find in particular in the Holy Science book by Sri Yukteswar. Goes into some detail. But I'll touch on them briefly just in case people don't know what they are. Not the first one, I'm sure by no means of any order, is the ability to become smaller than the smallest. The second, the ability to become infinitely large. Third is the ability to become weightless. Fourth is the ability to become heavy or dense. Fifth is the ability to instantaneously summon any item the user is aware of in that given moment. Fifth, did I say fifth? I think so. Sixth. Fifth, the ability to achieve or realize whatever one desires. Sixth, the ability to control nature. So that was the seventh. And then the eighth is the ability to control all material elements or natural forces. So we have talked about the cities before. That's a whole topic in and of itself. I don't really wish to go into too much detail on that now, but I did want to highlight that. What is interesting to me was, as we've talked about, Paramhansa Yogananda and some of the things that he was able to display in his lifetime, in his mastery over the cities. And maybe Mike, you could read a little passage for us, and then we can talk about that.
Sure. Yes, Yogananda had cities. Close disciples witnessed them at times. Peggy Dietz witnessed him levitate. Swami Kriyananda writes how Yogananda knew his every thought and everything he had done at a distance. Tulsi Bose saw him resurrect a dead person. He healed many seriously sick persons. Brother Bhaktananda witnessed how the master materialized carrot juice, filling many glasses miraculously from an almost empty pitcher, and so on. Yes, he knew the future and could also see the distant past, persons' previous incarnations. His cities were also revealed at his death. Yogananda's body remained in a state of complete incorruption for 3 weeks after his passing, described even in Time magazine, up to the moment his body was laid in the crypt. However, Yogananda did not advocate displaying such powers in public. He said, "Many come expecting miracles, but those who have realized God never show their powers unless God directs them to. People don't see that in that complete humility lies the greatest miracle. If I were to perform miracles in public, I could attract crowds of followers, but that isn't the way God wants it."
Pretty awesome, isn't it? That at the core of a lot of the wisdom that Yogananda taught and Sri Yukteswar was this great immense power and mastery, but the humility was there to say, look, they're not my powers, and if I'm directed to use them, absolutely, but it's not not powers to kind of flaunt. And you probably know stories from the Autobiography of Yogi as well, where Yogananda talked about some masters who had power over certain cities, which is certainly awesome, and something to marvel at in some way. And I'm sure that'll be some science of the future, as we've mentioned in previous minutes. But I thought Yogananda, certainly one to be measured in his approach, is exemplary really in this stage. because it's very seductive to go after these things, really, when you talk about these very uncommon supernatural powers versus the uncommon ones, which I do want to spend a bit more time on in a moment. Priyank, what would you like?
Yes, I found a nice section in the Autobiography of Yogi in the chapter, The Law of Miracles. Can I read that section?
Go for it.
The law of miracles is operable by any man who has realized that the essence of creation is light. A master is able to employ his divine knowledge of light phenomena to project instantly into perceptible manifestation the ubiquitous light forms. The actual form of the projections, whatever it may be, a tree, a medicine, a human body, is determined by the yogi's wish and by his power of will and of visualization. At night, man enters a state of a dream consciousness and escapes from the false egoistic limitations that daily hem him round. In sleep, he has an ever recurrent demonstration of the omnipotence of his mind. Lo, in the dream appears his long dead friends, the remotest continents, the resurrected scenes of his childhood. That free and unconditioned consciousness, which all men briefly experience in certain of their dreams, is the permanent state of mind of a God-tuned master. Innocent of all personal motives and employing the creative will bestowed on him by the Creator, a yogi rearranges the light atoms of the universe to satisfy any sincere prayer of a devotee.
One thing that crossed my mind when I was looking at this was, whilst I would have a critique to say, probably I would prefer to have seen more depth of content on, superpowers or supernatural abilities by our guru. That might be a little bit more inspiring than Bikram's, motorbike stunt. I did think, look, it's a tough subject because, whilst Mike, you read out some comments there on some of the personal experiences of some of the devotees that maybe witnessed or saw some miraculous, supernatural abilities that Yogananda had. I would I would comment that they're probably very unlikely to come forward and put that into a documentary. You're probably not going to be out there talking about that. For one, you can't really prove it, and maybe it comes under a lot of scrutiny. And if you're already skeptical, that's probably something you want to avoid, putting out there. But yeah, they have a hard time with it, I would say. So I don't really blame them for throwing in something like that for a few 20 seconds just to kind of grab people's attention and then, sink them into the content a bit more. But Priyank, what would you like?
Yeah, but also we have to remember that at the time of the film's release, Bikram hadn't been through all these controversies. And remember, part of the film's purpose was to pull new people into the path of yoga, whereas they may not have, everyone, or a lot of people have heard about Bikram yoga. It's more famous than most other forms of yoga. So they would have it would be foolish not to use Bikram. He's a devotee of Yogananda, to use that, all those people that know about Bikram and to pull them into the direction of Yogananda. And obviously that in this instance hasn't aged well because there's all the controversy surrounding Bikram, but who knows what the truth is. But also in that respect, nothing in this world is perfect, right? Not this film, because it's got, say, 99% of it may be like, pure and inspiring, and then there's that 1%. We are in the obviously we're in the material world, and not everything has a duality element to it. So there's that element perhaps now to the film. It's got this little bit that people may not want to see. But from what he's saying there, you can't disagree with anything that he said, really, can you? You may question his character.
Sure. I actually don't even mean to question his character. I just mean that it's probably almost derogatory of the yogic power to say, that these guys might be able to have a motorbike crossing on a bed of needles, and there's so much more depth to it, I suppose.
Yeah, but my 17-year-old nephew, likely he'll remember that scene more than more of the other film, more of the other scenes.
It's an ooh ah scene, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mike?
Yeah, I mean, you can always say hindsight is 2020, and the kind of people they invite, if like, especially these days where we I don't know, like we see things often in the context of now, things that happened a long time ago, and yeah, it's difficult because, like Priyank said, they didn't know. Like I feel from the perspective of the filmmakers, they didn't know that Bikram would have this controversial story in his life there, and they probably wouldn't have invited him if they knew. So I think adding the motorcycle scene is kind of it is something that people are interested in, and you are doing a documentary, and you really want to pick all the parts that you feel like people would be interested in, and I think that's definitely one of them. Another thing I wanted to say is that I remember of the thing I read earlier, the Bhaktananda scene with the carrot juice, right? And I'm pretty sure most of the people that were there at this event, they didn't even know that something like this was happening. They were just drinking their juice. It's similar to when Jesus was handing out the fish and the bread, right? Like people probably didn't even know this was happening. That was only his close disciples. And I feel like that's one thing that about miracles is when you are able to perceive them, then it's usually a blessing. It's like God allows you to see this. God allows you to see that this creation is actually an illusion, and you can like cut through it with the omnipotent powers of God.
Carlos?
No, it's I like the way that Mike took it, but just I do think that there is a conscious effort in the movie to try to make it popular and kind of light. The topics, I mean, the thing about Yogananda's teachings is if you're not committed to something like in spiritual improvement or something like that, it's very hard to listen to all those truths, right? It's very difficult, and I think the movie tried to be lighter and easier, and sometimes have something like really popular. Look at all the personalities, and and the deep things are mentioned, but people can easily overlook. Now, with that said, I have had difficulty having a lot of people watch it till the end, because it inevitably touches you deeply, and then it's uneasy, right, to think about all the things that I'm not doing, and then I think if you're committed to the path, it's easier, but if you're not, then it's tough.
Agreed. There are for the the dedicated or the actual devotees or Kriyabans amongst us, this film has just one element. We would focus much more on the dedication of Lake Shrine or these other films that Self-Realization Fellowship have released, and they're set much more differently. They're set quite, we usually have them to lead us into a very deep meditation, whereas you wouldn't use Awake for that purpose. As Carlos has said, it's set for the masses. It's made it light and it's made it entertaining. There's rock and roll music and various elements of it.
The last image, I think, in the last minute and coming into this minute, was Yogananda, kind of almost wrestling with the tiger. And I thought that's a hilarious picture, really. And you can see he's smiling. He's clearly having a bit of a laugh, not taking it too seriously, but in way of promoting what really he's trying to get across. So absolutely agree with all the comments myself. So if I may, I would move on actually to the oncoming supernatural. powers. And as Bikram, yes, did rightly say, we all have these powers. And Yogananda talked about that as well. And again, when I was searching, I saw some great information out there, but one in particular was on the YSS of India page. And there's a few bits in here that I thought worth reading. Maybe Priyank, you could kick us off with just that first section.
Yep. All of God's children are endowed with the highest intelligence, intuition, the all-knowing wisdom of the soul. Intuition is soul guidance, appearing naturally in man during those instants when his mind is calm. Nearly everyone has had the experience of an inexplicably correct hunch or has transferred his thoughts accurately to another person.
It's a funny thing, isn't it? Because nearly he says, Yogananda himself says, nearly everybody has had this experience. I can share a couple of things. One with my mum. Very connected to her. Often, if she was to ring me, I would kind of get that little Bluetooth message. I'm thinking of my mum, and then hey, there she is. She rings. Or a friend one in particular, I don't see for years. In a chunk, and then I would see him again, and it's happened multiple times where I'd really intensely be thinking about him, and then the next day he might be in touch, or we might bump into each other or something like that. And I always said to him, "This is so strange. I was just thinking about you a lot. I was just thinking about how you were, what you were doing." And it happens a lot, and there's tons of those stories like that. I just wondered if you guys had any of these more common intuitive moments with.
Yeah, like Carlos was just saying that we do this online meditation stuff, and so we have it very structured. Like we have chanters and we have readers, and like I personally like to link the reading to the chant. So I always ask whoever's doing a reading, like, send me what you're going to read, because I'll pick a chant that's relevant. And 3 or 4 times now, and I like to, because I'm quite a new chanter, I'm quite new with the harmonium. I like to learn new chants. And 3 or 4 times now, the chant that I've learned has been, she would just send me the reading, and it would be perfect for the chant that I'm reading. So like, for example, talking about dreams, and then the other week I was learning From This Sleep, Lord, Will You Wake Me? And I was like, oh, this is just insane. What is the for all the chants, and for me to be just learning this, and I wanted to play this at some point, and then it's just, that's happened 3 or 4 times. And there's all these subtle things like that happen that we generally just go, oh, that's a nice coincidence, and that's nice, and we don't really, we don't think of it as God smiling at us, but that's really what it is, because it's revealing a little bit of that good connection that you've developed through your practice with God.
Yeah, Carlos.
I was going to make a note exactly Priyank's situations like that, and what I learned is something about receptiveness, right? So because sometimes we have these hunches, or many times, and we kind of dismiss it. Oh, this is out of place. What is this thought, right? And then I think the biggest change that has been, for me at least, is now I just follow through, even if it doesn't make any sense in the context. And then later on, it proves that, it made total sense, but you couldn't see it. Like in your case, like, oh, I'm going to learn this song. And then, no, that's the wrong song. And then you try to intellectualize it. No, just learn that song. And then, the proof comes later, right? So you have to have that receptiveness to accept the hunch and follow it through.
You again intuitively picked up in a little reading that was good. Like to read it. Mike, I'll come to you now.
I just wanted to share some little things that I find are often, I oftentimes feel like when I say I want to meet somebody, and you know how life is these days, especially during the pandemic. You get like, I don't know, like suddenly you have a meeting or suddenly something happens and you like your schedule changes often. And I've had this so many times recently that I kind of said like, oh, I was going to meet this guy just to hang out or something, or talk to someone, and like more like something that is more like free timey. And then suddenly something came in, and then I was like, oh, Guruji, why is this conflict happening now? Please help me. And then on 2 occasions, that person I was going to meet them called me and said, oh, I don't have time anyways. I can't do this. And so somehow my schedule conflicts, they kind of went away. And I feel like maybe those people are like receptive to me, and they kind of felt this is not happening today, but maybe another time. And I feel like life can often be like this. When you just talk to Guruji and say, Guruji, help me out of this, then he oftentimes does a little thing, and then suddenly it fixes it.
Right.
Yeah, I also like to give another example where it can correct your life in a sense. So, for example, I think on 3 or 4 occasions in the last 10 days, I've had to cut my meditations short in the morning. So basically not have as long a period of meditation, or not finish a practice, because I think something is very imminent and I need to address it like straight away, like, 10 minutes earlier than I would have finished. And it's always happened, and Guruji is always like obviously telling me off. It's always happened that I could have actually spent that extra 10 minutes and it would have made zero difference. But I chose to, place more emphasis or more importance on what was going to happen in that part of the day. And it's even simple things like, for example, yeah, I needed to go into work early once, and I was like, okay, I've sat down for meditation. I don't need to go to work early, but I set myself up for doing that. But I'm having a good meditation. Should I stay? And I was like, no, I've booked myself in early, so I'll go in early. And then like I went to the train, and all the trains were messed up. So I ended up going late anyway, not late, but on time. So I was like, you should really listen to your intuitional feelings much more. And sometimes, and in 4 times now in the last 10 days, a similar or iterative version of this instance has happened during my meditations.
Yeah. And, even driving, I remember hearing somebody say they've developed their intuition to a point where they know where the speed cameras are. And like really mobile speed cameras, stationary.
Wow.
So they can, and they speed a lot. So Mike, maybe you can continue reading on that same image on the red text.
Every man has the power of intuition, as he has the power of thought. As thought can be cultivated, so intuition can be developed. In intuition, we are in tune with reality, with the world of bliss, with the unity in diversity, with the inner laws governing the spiritual world, with God. But it needs to be developed. In the life of every person, 2 forces of knowledge and operative from birth: the power of human reason, along with its satellites of sensation, perception, conception, and so forth, and the power of intuition. The former is developed through social institutions and interactions. The latter usually remains uncultured, undeveloped, because of want of proper guidance and methods of training.
Thanks. And it goes on to say the intuitive power can be developed by learning the step-by-step methods of scientific, deepest meditation that lead to self-realization. And man's highest faculty is not reason, but intuition, apprehension of knowledge derived immediately and spontaneously from the soul, not the fallible agency of the senses or of reason. So really kind of powerful stuff, making a very clear statement there. If you're going to develop anything, develop your intuition. And Mike, do you want to jump in?
That reminds me of a story that brother told at Lakeshine 2 weeks ago of a devotee from, I think, Puerto Rico, and he meditated. He did his 108 kriyas morning and evening, and his EEs and everything, and he did this for many years, for 20, 30 years, and he saw in his meditations the spiritual eye, and he said he doesn't see it small, he sees it very large. And then one day, his wife, who is also a devotee, and they were both serving in the group there in Puerto Rico, he told his wife that this big spiritual eye is telling him he needs to go home. His time on earth is over. And his wife, she didn't want to hear that. She was like, whatever, that doesn't mean anything to me. But he kept repeating it. He told the spiritual eye that he doesn't want to go home yet, but the spiritual eye is like, no, your time is up. You're going home. And and then eventually he did. And it was, in the end, it was a comforting feeling for the wife, because she felt like, I wanted to mourn, but at the same time, it felt awkward because the spiritual eye told him, and basically his time was up. So what am I crying about? And this is, I guess, an extreme case of intuition coming to you.
Yeah, kind of be careful what you wish for in a sense, and
yeah.
don't wish for the things that you can't handle. But Yogananda does go some way to hammer the point home in a sense. Maybe Prank, you can read the blue arrow content image.
So long as one's intuition remains undeveloped, he is guided mainly by the limited understanding of mortal intelligence, with only occasional promptings of intuitive wisdom. Thus, he engages in some good actions, but also in many wrong actions, and acquires many bad habits. Through the operation of the law of cause and effect, or karma, he finds himself following helplessly his own self-created destiny, which often leads to misery.
Yes, I can relate to that, and I can see that in loved ones. It's the developing of the intuition is so strong, but the power of reason can go so far. So it really, when I read that, I thought, this is a good something good to highlight, that Yogananda himself is kind of shooting. How do you say? It's a warning shot across the bow, isn't it? I think that one. So that we could go into lots of detail on this, but I really thought that this minute was dominated by the supernatural definition that we've kind of jumped into in some depth, but really with Yogananda, as ever, he does make it very practical and grounds it very well, and gives you the ability to succeed in life, really. And I think that's one reason for me, anyway, why I'm here on the SRF path. But maybe Carlos, there's a nice quote from Yogananda on this subject, if you would like to read that out.
Yeah. Anyone seeking would accomplish more if he concentrated upon increasing the receptive quality of his brain cells, instead of depending just on books and college work for his progress.
That's something that, again, I read and thought, yeah, we do live in a very book smart society, and it's great to see this teaching coming from the east to the west, and this commingling of the two. So I just thought on this subject, supernatural powers doesn't have to be mystical, magical, and unobtainable, and even those that are cities and very deep spiritual powers really aren't the object of desire. It shouldn't be, because really we can make this very practical and look to attune ourselves with bliss, as Yogananda puts it. Carlos.
Yeah, no, I just realized it says the receptive quality, so the receptiveness, right? That thing that that's what you mentioned before, yeah, right?
Yeah.
So exactly, yeah. It's
Exactly.
it's about being able to accept that you have it, right? Being able to come to terms with the fact that this faculty exists, right? And and uh, and to give up on reason
Mhm.
to an extent, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, give up on reasons probably a reach. But I certainly think Yogananda is making a distinction between the two and highlighting that one is superior to the other, and that we do have limited faculties in reason for the most part. Maybe something to do with the great subject of the yugas for the most part, as I know I like to harp on about. But really, that really summarizes the minute for me. We have not, I was about to say doctor, but Robert Love, the journalist, who comes in at the end of the minute again to say, here's a small brown mystic from a nation that very few Americans had ever been to, much less read about. And he is here delivering his message with such force through personal transmission to people who came to see him. So the supernatural powers of Yogananda came through his voice primarily, that he was able to communicate all of that to us in a way he can bring us on for this journey. So brilliant.
Yes, there's some images in the minute that really hit home these messages, like through such force, for example, he transmitted these messages through such force. And there's an image of him, Yogananda, at the front, and the crowd, I think they're doing the healing technique, they're doing like this warm thing, and that looks like it's a really nice vibe. Yeah, and there's also an image of him like standing on a hilltop, with not an image, actually this is a video, with the sunset in the background, which is hair flowing in the wind, a really lovely shot there. And finally, there's also another image where he's in his ochre robes, almost suited and booted, and it says Swami teaches in inverted commas art of living. That's a newspaper shot. So yeah, some really nice imagery. I would encourage you to look at that, and also the one that Chris mentioned, which was Guruji opening a tiger's head at the camera and flexing his muscles.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, they've done a good job here, and I know I threw in the side of critique, but as ever, I'm very pleased to see the work and how they're tying everything together. They really are making themes with this. So,
so Chris, that's good you did that. So no one can say to us we're only saying the positives.
Exactly.
We're analyzing every part of the film.
Brainwashed. Yeah. Awesome. So yeah, with that, I would wrap up. If anybody else has any comments, any reflections, Mike.
I really love that picture where he's standing on the hill. I'm gonna have that framed, put it on the wall somewhere.
Get like a GIF and make it like a digital photo frame so that you can actually see the video.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I really like that that story Mike said, that that brother, who was it, which brother gave that talk?
Brother Sarvananda.
Sarvananda, yeah. So he about the spiritual eye and him being called home. That's really powerful, isn't it? And then told his wife, and she wouldn't have it. I think if I told my wife such things, she would just wouldn't be able to take it very well. So the fact that she could just dismiss it, that's quite powerful.
It came to somebody who could manage.
Yeah.
Awesome. Carlos, thanks for joining us on this minute. How do you find it?
Thank you.
Do you have any comments?
No, it was great. Thank you very much. Very insightful. Had fun.
With that, Jai Guru, thanks for joining
everyone. Take care.
Jai Guru.
Stay Guru.
Bye-bye.